Still Farm channel. Alright, so I have pretty much all the varnish removed now, and you'll understand when the varnish is removed because it'll start to get kind of dull and kind of like a piece of wood that you just got from Home Depot. It's going to have kind of like that natural finish. There's still a little bit on the head here, but we'll work with that later. So yeah, after you remove the varnish, if there is a staple on the bottom, there was on mine, you want to make sure you take that out. And now we're going to begin the process of actually fitting the head onto the axe. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that I was somewhat fortunate that this is pretty much a near perfect fit, but it's still going to require some tweaking. But if you do have an axe head and it is too small for the tip of the handle here, there's a couple ways to go about this. One is you can flip it from upside down, and you kind of could observe where your gaps and where it's fat. And then from there, what I do is I take a pencil and I'd start marking out. I need to take off some here, a little bit here, and then the darker my pencil mark, the darker I'm going to file, or rasp rather. And then yeah, so once you get it started, what you're going to need to start doing is you want to set this axe head onto this handle a little bit. And the way you're going to do this is going to seem kind of strange. Alright, let's try that again. So the way that you need to set this on here is going to seem kind of strange, and what you need to do is you take your wooden mallet, and I have the axe head on the bottom here, and I'm going to hit the handle from the top. I know that seems kind of strange. Well, what's actually happening is it's one of Newton's laws. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and objects at rest tend to stay at rest. And what's happening, this axe head is at rest, and it tends to stay at rest. So what you're doing is you're forcing this axe handle to move in motion quicker than the axe head can compensate, and in turn what you do is you start driving the axe head onto the handle, if that makes sense. So now if you look at this handle here, you can see we're starting to get little burrs. And what that is, that's the axe head being forced onto the handle, and it's starting to roll a little bit of that wood there. Just a little bit going on there. And then from here, again, what I like to do is I like to look, and I like to see where we're hitting. And then what I do, try and get you in view here. So I see we're hitting a little bit right here. There's a little gap right there, so I'm not going to file or rasp there. So I'm going to go a little bit here. Got a little bit in this section right here. Flip it around to the other side. Trying to get you in view of the camera here. So I got a little bit that I got to take off right there, a little heavier. I'm going to go kind of light around here, a little bit heavier here. And yeah, a little bit in the front right there. So now that I have that marked out, this is where having a wooden mallet really comes in handy. Because now what I need to do is I need to remove the head from the handle. And how I do that is I take my wooden mallet and start working it off. And there she goes. So again, looking at the handle here, you can also tell where you're kind of high or low. You'll notice some rub marks. Kind of hard to film this, jeez. So there's a little bit of rubbing right there, a little bit right there, a lot of rubbing right there. So that's kind of how you judge on where you need to file. All right, so now that I've made my marks, what I need to start doing is filing down, again rasping in the areas where I've marked. And how I set this up is I set this up on the corner of my welding table. You can do this in a bench vise too. Just make sure you wrap the handle with a piece of cloth so you don't damage it. But anyway, the way I do this, on the edge of my welding table, I take two 11R Vise Grip clamps, and I have little wedges, and they just snug in between the handle and the Vise Grip, and then I give a little tap of those wedges. And that just snugs up the handle in here. And because we don't have too much to take off here, I'm going to use my diamond rasps, because that doesn't really take off too much. And then Again, for this, I really don't need to take much off. If, again, the axe eye was very small for the tip of the handle head, then I'd be using my red tang rasp. I'm going at it rather heavy. So then I'm going to reset. My marks. Feel on the other side with my finger, because when you're rasping this down, there's actually somewhat of a little lip where the wood gets fatter. And you may need to bring the axe head further down, so you may need to take more of this lip further down the handle. And then you just want to keep checking to make sure that lip is even on both sides. So, feeling where it's at. Making my new mark. Alright, and that's just roughing it in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the same steps. I'm going to put the axe head back on here. Here's my axe head. Make sure it's in the same orientation. I'm going to take my wooden mallet again. Fit it on there. And it's getting really close, and I really didn't do much to this. Again, I'm very fortunate with the fitting of this, so it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but it is almost perfectly snug in there. Then this is what it looks like from the top, which I'm not concerned about this at all. If it looks like you have a lot of space up here, don't worry about that now. When we drive our finishing wedge in here, that'll help spread this out, and it'll fill pretty much all the gaps in there. So I'm just going to work on this a little bit longer, make sure it's fit perfectly, and then we'll go about the finishing process of this. I'll share that with you, and then we'll move on from there. Alright, so after working with this for about 20 minutes, I got it just about right where I like it. And again, what I'm looking for here is I'm trying to make sure that this fit around the bottom here is nice and snug, which it is. And then also another thing I'm looking for is I'm trying to make sure that the head of the axe isn't pitched forward or if it's tilted back. And a good way that you can determine if it's doing that is if you look at the handle, if you look at the gap towards the rear of the axe and towards the cutting edge of the axe, you want both those gaps to be about the same. You can also kind of tell is if it's counter-levered forward or turned back, then you can kind of tell if that angle's kind of off. I like where the fit is. The last thing I need to do is just do some final touching up of this handle where the axe sits. And additionally, I want to make sure that the cut or the kerf in here goes about halfway down this axe head. So that's just my opinion. Other people may have different opinions out there. That's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rough it by eye. I'm going to take my caliper, go from the tip of the handle here. I'm just going to measure to about center where the axe sits. And I got that measurement. Now what I'm going to do is remove this axe head once more. If you guys do decide to make one of your homemade wooden mallets like this, I do recommend using hardwood, and additionally try to keep one side very flat and flush. You only want to beat up one side because this other side of the hammer is going to come in handy later, and I'll show you when we get there. But alright, so now first thing I'm going to do is just check with my caliper where that kerf goes down there. And we're right about perfect, so I'm not concerned about that. That looks good. And now the next thing I need to do before I do my final fit is I just need to touch up this handle. Alright, let me readjust the camera here a little bit. Get you a good peek on there. So as you can see where the axe sits on here. Because when I was forcing it down there last time, it was creating these lines where it was literally peeling back the wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch this up very lightly. You don't want to fuck with this too much. Damn wedges. Alright. So again, just touch this up nice and lightly. What I like to do here is I kind of like to leave a slight incline going up the handle here. So that way when I go to forcibly drive the axe head onto this handle for the last time, if it is a little loose, it has somewhere to go. If you leave these little lines right here where the axe is peeling back the wood, it's going to be restricted to only sit in that little channel right there, as opposed to making kind of a wedge or a path for the axe to travel further down the handle. That will allow the axe head to snug further onto the handle. If that kind of makes sense. So very lightly, just flicking this off. Don't want to go too deep. That's pretty close to where I want it. Now the next tool I'm going to use is this hand file, which has kind of a light contour on it. And it has a fine and a coarse side. Here's the fine side. There's the coarse side. I'm going to use the fine side with the contour, and I'm just going to get in here a little bit more. I know it's bad practice to drag the file back across your work like this, but it's a wood file. I'm not concerned. If it was metal, I wouldn't be doing this. Okay, that looks nice. And now the final thing I'm going to do is just take a piece of sandpaper and come in here. Just smooth it out. Make sure I have any varnish that I want off removed. Because once you fit this axe head on here for the last time, it's going to be very hard and challenging for you to come back in here and kind of touch this up, because you're going to have the axe head in the way and you're not going to be able to get your hand in there. So it is very slow and very tedious work. But if you take the time to do this right, it'll all pay off in the end. So now I'm going to flip this over, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Nice and easy. I like to go little taps. Don't drive this thing in here.